Good morning, everyone. As you just heard, this meeting is being recorded. We thank you so much for attending. Please mute your microphones, and if you're having internet troubles, we recommend turning off not only muting, but also turning off your camera. It's a great way for you to save bandwidth if you're feeling like the presentation is coming through choppy. I originally started the meeting with asking everyone in the chat to introduce themselves. If you would like to identify by your organization or something else about you that makes you special, feel free to do so in the chat box. And then the question was, what is your very first sign of spring or your favorite sign of spring? So please drop those in. I'm enjoying seeing everything from a lot of flowers. I feel like flowers are clearly our spring awakening here in Pittsburgh, but also some baseball and some mud. So I really hope that you're all enjoying this warm weather we're getting, as well as an unseasonably kind rain season. But let's not let that lull us into a sense of ease, as we all know that stormwater is one of the greatest hazards we have here in Allegheny County. It's important for us to remember that rain is our friend and brings about the spring, but also can cause lots of damage to our region. And that's really why we're all here. We are members of the Green Infrastructure Network. The Green Infrastructure Network is an evolving and growing collaborative of 80 volunteer organizations, universities, businesses, and government partners who recognize the benefits of green infrastructure in managing Allegheny County's stormwater problem. First, I'd like to thank Alkazan for supporting the GIN and making these workshops possible. Today, we have a really special presentation for you. Please help me welcome the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy. The idea for this workshop actually popped up in a previous GIN agenda. Back in 2019, members of the GIN had requested a field visit and site tour of the Frick Environmental Center. And although there's been some staff changes, and of course, we all know COVID-19, it has changed the ability for us to gather in the way we probably meant when we had historically requested that visit. But today I'm pleased to offer you a virtual tour and a look inside the living building we have here in Pittsburgh. So today we'll be talking about the Frick Environmental Center and learn about the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy's green infrastructure projects all around our region. The building itself was a project between the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy and the City of Pittsburgh. It's a certified living building, which I'm excited to learn more about today, and has achieved the ranking of LEED Platinum. So let me introduce our speakers. The first speaker will be Reed Hoffmeyer. He's the site manager for the Frick Environmental Center. He is responsible for the day-to-day operation and maintenance of the building and grounds, and has the inside information on how the systems are designed and operate. He's also the day-to-day connection between park users, building occupants, and the facility to help get as much of a positive experience during their visits as possible. Welcome, Reed. We also have with us today Camilla Rivera Pinsley, the Director of Education and the Director of the Frick Environmental Center for the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy. A graduate of Penn State, she started her career in Eastern PA as an educator naturalist and has worked within the environmental education field ever since. We're happy to have her at the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy. Welcome, Camilla. Lastly, we'll hear a presentation from Erin Copeland, who is the Senior Restoration Ecologist for the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy and has advocated, planned, implemented natural and built green infrastructure in our parks in the city of Pittsburgh. She has a BS in ecology and political science and an MS in forest ecology. Welcome, Erin. So everyone, sit back, relax, and enjoy this beautiful Zoom meeting that will discuss one of Pittsburgh's greatest assets, our parks, and of course, our living building. Take it away, Reed.
All right, we will let Camilla get us started here with an introduction.
All right, thank you so much, Reed. Good morning, everyone. My name is Camilla Rivera Tinsley, and I'm the Director of Education and the Director of the Frick Environmental Center. As was stated earlier, what you are about to learn about the Frick Environmental Center is really amazing because it belongs to the city of Pittsburgh. It belongs to each of you if you live within the city. it belongs to all of us, and that is an amazing resource. A little bit about the Parks Conservancy. We are the nonprofit partner of the city of Pittsburgh. What we do is we raise lots of capital so that we can support the city to create amazing projects like the Frick Environmental Center. Our areas of work are capital projects, ecological restoration, and education. Whenever we go into a project or we decide to restore an area, a fountain, or a park, we make sure that we are taking into consideration ecological sensitivity. We are also really concerned with historic preservation and the needs of current users. For us, historic preservation is really about a connection to the individuals that built the city, that live in the city, that work in the city. So it speaks to a sense of place. And we really want Pittsburghers to be able to connect to their green spaces, because the hope is that once we invest in this way, they will want to invest in the future.
Okay, thank you, Camilla. I'm assuming everybody can see my screen, but I'm going to give just a whirlwind tour so everybody can orient yourselves with the site before we take a deeper dive into some of these systems. So the Frick Environmental Center is located in Frick Park. It's a 650-acre, mostly wooded park between the Squirrel Hill and Regent Square and Homewood neighborhoods. And when you pull into our driveway there, you can see our main driveway has permeable pavers there. We have some restored historic gatehouses, or the formal entryway. When you enter the main formal entry, you can see the Frick Environmental Center off to the right. It has a really low profile from the entranceway. That is by design. As nice as the building is, the real draw we really want to be to the trees and the trails and just the beautiful park behind it. So the building's kind of hidden down there, even though as great as it is. If you come in the main entrance and take a left, go around the trail to the left, you can see our solar panels there. That is covering a parking area. In the foreground on the left side is our From Slavery to Freedom garden that you will hear more about. And then on the right side, we have a barn. The barn consists of some public restrooms that are open to anybody, unlocked and open to anybody from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. It also contains some mechanical equipment for our rainwater collection system, as well as just equipment storage for the Parks Conservancy that we use to maintain many of the parks in Pittsburgh. Towards the back of the site, we have restored a historic fountain. The old fountain used to have a continuous jet that shot about 15 feet in the air. A redesigned fountain has this low bubble with a spillover edge to conserve our energy and water budget. Another thing you'll see here is that main pathway on the right there that walks out back towards that formal entranceway. That's what we call our alley. And below that, we have 16 geothermal wells. They each go down 525 feet and form a closed loop of glycol that feeds our ground source heat pumps for the heating and cooling system. Then if you circle down below the building, you can see that the building is deceptively large. It has 3 stories of south-facing windows. It's built into the hillside there. So that was just a quick little tour, and we'll go a little deeper into what we just glossed over if Camilla will introduce us to the Living Building Challenge.
Yeah, so it was very interesting that many of you all said that what your favorite sign of spring is a flower. Ironically, or not ironically, the symbol of the Living Building Challenge is a flower. So Living Building Challenge is a sustainable design framework that goes beyond just a checklist of sustainability measures. So it goes beyond things like net zero water or net zero energy, or even materials. It goes a little bit deeper into things like health and beauty and equity. That was one of the reasons why the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy chose to partake in something like the Living Building Challenge, because we see the city of Pittsburgh as a holistic ecological site, a whole ecosystem, if you will. We see each of our sites as that way. And the Living Building Challenge challenges each of its users to see its building and and the site that the building is sitting on as a holistic entity that is fitting within the environment around it.
Thank you, Camilla. And this one's you also.
All right. So each of the petals that you saw in the slide before has about three or four, excuse me, has three or four
imperatives.
Thank you. Has 3 or 4 imperatives that that the designers had to be able to reach. And those imperatives for the site are limits to growth, urban agriculture, and habitat exchange. So a little bit about the Frick Environmental Center. Previous to the building that you see right now, there was an old center that had burned down sometime in the late 80s. And that center, thank you very much, Reed, sat for a little bit, and it was a great opportunity for the Parks Conservancy to come in and think about an amazing redesign. One of the things that we were able to do was to maintain the original footprint of the building. So going back to that imperative or that petal of site, staying within the smallest footprint that you're able to achieve is one of those things, and we were able to do that. So the building sits on the same original footprint, but we have actually increased the amount of space because instead of spreading out, we have 3 floors as opposed to the original 2 floors that were on that site. All right, another piece of our site is the From Slavery to Freedom Garden. And so the Living Building Challenge is a regenerative design process. And it was an opportunity for us to put a regenerative designed garden within our space. And we took that a step further by not just thinking about the ecological design principles here. We thought about how people would use the space, and we thought about the equitable use of the space. So here in this photo, you can see some children interacting with the garden, and that garden bed in the center there is a raised bed that is using a soilless media, and it's an opportunity for us to teach children about the way that plants grow, but more importantly about sustainable materials and why we would choose to use those sustainable materials within our site.
All right, thanks, Camilla. All right, I will talk about the materials petal. Materials petal that has a few, it's definitely one of the less glamorous, but very important petals here. Has a few imperatives to look over. First would be conservation and reuse. Basically, boil that down, it means in the demolition and construction process, we, as much as possible, tried to avoid putting materials in the landfills. And I'm just going to go pretty quickly here. So I think we'll have a Q&A at the end. Remember any questions you might have. And otherwise, I'm just going to go pretty quickly. But embodied carbon footprint, as much as we like to say they are minimal impact and this and that, obviously you can't build anything without having a carbon impact. So to offset that, we were required to track the carbon footprint of our construction process and purchase carbon offsets to offset that. Another imperative is the red list. And if you ask anybody who is involved in the design and construction process, most of them will probably tell you this was the most difficult of the entire thing. Basically, we have a list of 430 some chemical compounds that are allowed to be in any of the materials that we use, from drywall to light plate switch covers, just everything. And it basically boils down to these groups. It's things like formaldehyde and PVC and VOCs. So the challenge was to all the manufacturers of every product we used and have them off vetting the product to say that it contains none of these chemical compounds. And what we learned in the process is that material suppliers are not always willing and able to share this information. So that's and I mean, it's really difficult to do, but in a way that's the way we were moving the needle a little bit, is just looking for transparency in the products industry because you can even see now between when we started this process to current living buildings coming through the process now, suppliers are more and more inclined to just have this information ready to go, that there is a market for green materials. So that's pretty exciting. Another thing we also found, vetting those materials, obviously natural materials are going to be the easiest. Stone, concrete, untreated wood, things like that are fairly sustainable in a relative sense. The one last imperative with the materials petal is responsible sourcing. So first, you have to ensure that your products are being sourced responsibly. For example, lumber that is used has to be FSC certified, that type of thing. The other thing is sourcing distance. So basically, you boil that down. It means that the heavier the material, the closer it has to be to the job site. So for example, the stone we used on the site was quarried outside of Butler, whereas some specialized electronic components may have come from Europe. Okay, so now we're on to the equity petal. Camilla can tell us about this. You might be muted, Camilla.
I am, thank you. So part of the equity imperative demands that that we take a look at democracy, social justice. We also pay attention to the scale of the place, so a human scale and a humane place. And it also states that everyone who visits the site has to have rights to nature. This also means that when Reed mentioned in the beginning that the building has a very low profile, so if you ever have a chance to walk onto the site and you walk up that main alley and look to the right, you'll see that the building is nestled into the hillside, and that is purposeful because what we want to do is we want to make sure that everyone is able to see the nature that is around the building. So we are highlighting the living space of the building, and we're less focusing on that hardscape and the infrastructure. That also allows the neighbors around the Parks Conservancy and around the facility, their views of the beautiful park vistas are not impeded by the building. So that is one way that folks, that visitors have rights to nature. The other way that we played with that imperative was to think about what are the historical rights that folks have had to nature. So what people feel invited into parks or invited into green spaces, and what people don't feel invited into green spaces. And so a lot of the programming and a lot of the design influence the programming that comes out of the facility. So the slide that you saw a couple of slides ago, the From Slavery to Freedom Garden, that allows us to actually talk about sustainable agriculture as well as talking about democracy and social justice, and really getting visitors to think about other voices and other narratives within the environmental field.
All right, so the energy petal, this is a big one. This is one of the ones that there's a lot of metrics and data collection involved, even though it only has one imperative, which is that we have to be net positive in on-site clean energy production, meaning we collect more, we create more clean energy than we use. So here's an overview of our site here. Basically, you can see on the left side, we have solar panels that are covering our parking lot, creating clean energy. We are using the energy for the site and the building, and surplus energy is being returned to the grid for Duquesne Light, being used in however they use it, in neighboring houses or wherever it goes. So basically, we do not have on-site energy storage. So for us, the definition of net zero means that in a 12-month period, we are selling more energy to the grid than we are buying back in return. So on a nice sunny day, for example, like a rainy day like last Thursday, for example, we may have only created maybe 50, 75 kilowatt hours of electricity, whereas on a nice sunny spring day, we might create a megawatt of electricity, which is way more than we could possibly use in a day. So it's feast or famine with that. On the flip side, last Thursday, we also added about 4,500 gallons of water to the cistern. So there's all that balance. Solar production, in an average year, we're creating about 166,000 kilowatt hours, which is pretty close to what we were modeled to create. So that's hats off to the modelers. Our building demand in an average year is about 115,000 kilowatt hours. That is 46% below the demand of a comparable building built to the 2008 ASHRAE standards. And it is, so that gives us a surplus between our production and our usage of about 51,000 kilowatt hours of electricity that we're returning to the grid. So 31% of our total production is surplus energy being returned. So on the demand side of things, the best strategies, much like with water, are going to be the tried and true ancient strategies of just passive energy reduction. Here you can see a diagram. You can see on the north and the left side of our building, we have two levels of natural insulation on the shady side of the building, and only one level above ground. And that's the one with the most public access there. Then on the south side of the building, we have that passive solar gain where, and you can see that roof overhang where in the summer months, the sun is high in the sky and the roof overhang is shading our windows to help and keep us a little bit cooler. Whereas in the winter months, the sun is passing below that roof line, and it really does work. It really heats up the classrooms and the office space on the south end of the building. Natural ventilation is another great passive design strategy. Just the way that we are facing the south side with our 3 levels of windows, we really take advantage of those prevailing summer winds. And the building is designed so that when we open the windows and when we're in natural ventilation mode, we create a natural draft of air, and there are some automatic windows that open automatically as soon as we open one window. There are some automatic windows that open on the north side. You can see over top of our stairwell that creates a heat stack that just pushes that hot air out of the building while bringing in some fresh air from outside. Some mechanical strategies that we use. I mentioned the geothermal heating and cooling before with our ground source heat pumps. We have radiant floor heating. We have an energy recovery unit. You can see a cross section of our insulation on the right-hand side. It's very, very effective, thick walls. LED lighting with occupancy sensors and ambient light sensors. Here you can see a floor plan of our HVAC system. We have 11 zones of heating and cooling that all have their separate controls. So so obviously that's an efficient strategy there. We're also monitoring CO2 and humidity in each of these spaces. And the HVAC system itself is controlled by a series of set points on indoor and outdoor temperature, humidity, CO2 levels, this and that. It's all fairly complicated. It's running through a building automation system, but it's pretty simple from a building occupant's standpoint. Basically, if you're in the building and that red light that you see on the right side of the screen is on, that means the building wants to be in mechanical heating or cooling mode. Please close the windows. If the green light is on, that means that conditions are right for natural ventilation mode. Please open the windows. And that's all we have to know. All right, Camilla, would you like to talk about the health pedal?
Sure. So the health pedal, the different imperatives under the health pedal, as you can see, are civilized environment, healthy interior environment, and biophilic design. Civilized environment really means that every single person within that building, if you are an occupant of that building, so that means that folks that work there all the time, you have to have an operable window providing fresh air and light. How civilized. So most of the education team feels really, really lucky if you're able to walk walk down into our offices. It is very bright, very airy, and there are a few spaces that we have that we've been tempted to say, okay, why don't we put an extra desk in this space that doesn't have any windows? But we don't do that because we are adhering to this pedal, which is actually really, really good for our productivity. So if you know anything about well building standards, you know that having some of these, there is some crossover between living building and well building. Another one of the imperatives is a healthy interior building. Reed talked about this in the previous slide a little bit. So that has to do with interior air quality. We have a really reactive ventilation system that goes back to that red and green light diagram that you saw. The reason why I like that system as an educator and as the director of education, I really pay attention to how people are using the space and what they're learning from the space. And so some living buildings are actually fully automated. So the building is really just paying attention to how much carbon dioxide is in the air, humidity, all of those things, and it's going to open and close the windows for you. Our particular building is using that light system, and it forces the user and the occupant to be cognizant of what they are doing. So I need to look up and see what those lights, see if it's a flashing green light, that means, hey, Camilla, why are you sitting here with the window open? Open up that window and let the fresh air in. So there's something about having to respond as a human to that light that really reinforces that learning pathway. So I find myself when I'm home and other people who use the building, you're constantly thinking about how you're responding to your space all the time. So that is a really nice touch. Another imperative is biophilic design. Most of you here on this call probably know about biophilic design. So biophilia really says that humans are from nature. And so every way that we think, live, breathe is really intrinsically linked to nature. And that's the way I like to think about biophilia. The biophilic design imperative says that we have to use natural materials. So you'll see a lot of wood elements and stone elements. There also has to be a lot of natural light. Again, those floor to ceiling windows are allowing all of that natural light to come in. We also have the rain ravine, which you can't see from this photo, but I do encourage you to come back out. So you see the ravine itself, but you can't see the rain veil. So inside the building, when you walk into the main entrance to the left-hand side on that first floor, there is an intentional gutterless roof that allows rainfall to cascade so that you're able to, from the inside of the building, to appreciate water, also to appreciate the sounds of water. And then that water trickles outside, and then you're able to see it in the rain ravine outside. And it really invites children and folks to interact with that space and to play with that space. The rain ravine itself, if you can see that in that top left corner there, is made out of sandstone, and that is an intentional design element. Over time, natural weathering will occur, moss, lichens, the same thing that you would find in a stream bed is going to happen in this designed stream bed, which is a very nice touch. All right, the next pedal is beauty. And beauty is one of those things that I was referring to in the beginning. So you wouldn't normally see something like beauty on a prescriptive list for something like LEED, right? But beauty is really important to someone like me who is an educator or someone who is approaching this type of project from a different vantage point. So the beauty pedal, the imperatives underneath that are beauty and spirit and inspiration and education. Beauty and spirit is really represented here. And there's a nice little crossover because we were able to use local artists and local artisans, and their work is reflected within this space. So you see on the gate that wrought iron design with the tree, that is a local artisan, as well as the gate that is within the two front gatehouses that are in front of our building. So every piece of the building, every design element is intentional, it is inclusive, and it is representative of Pittsburgh. So it really evokes and it is evocative of a sense of place. And then the other imperative there was inspiration and education. Obviously, that's the place where I feel that I can speak the best to this. So the building itself is very inspirational. When people walk onto the space, they're always in awe of it. I know that we get about 70,000 visitors or so. So we have a gate counter or a foot counter at the front gate, and we're able to see who comes in and out of that building. So just looking at who's coming in and out of the building, not even thinking about all of the folks that are just going to park underneath those solar panels, be inspired by looking up at the solar panels with their glass bottoms that are also biophilic and sort of representing that dappled sunlight that you'd see in the forest. All of those things are going to make people feel that sense of joy, that sense of wonder, that emotional connection that's going to make them, when they come and see me and I'm teaching them about the garden, or some other educator is teaching them about some other meaningful space, they're going to have an unforgettable connection to that space. And then we hope that they will become future ecologists, designers, environmentalists, folks like you who are sitting on this call.
All right, and that brings us to the water pedal. And I'm going to have to admit I was a little nervous coming into this because I'm presenting on a subject that pretty much everyone out there knows more about than I do. But I can tell you what we have, and hope that you all go easy on me in the Q&A. Anyway, the two imperatives with water is we have to be net positive in water, just like with the energy, and then we have to be conscientious of the ecological water flow. So water management strategies for our net zero water strategy. Basically, we are collecting rainwater that falls on top of the solar panels as well as the roof of the barn building. And those are being collected in the cistern that you saw on that previous slide. That's a buried cistern, 15,000 gallons, as well as a few above ground rain barrels that we use for the produce gardens. So that captured water that we're using is being used for the toilets, the fountain, and irrigating the produce garden. And some of our low flow strategies, I had mentioned before how the fountain has a small jet with a really shallow reservoir, just low flow fixtures, standard stuff there. But typically we are using, well, I have some numbers towards the end, but I think we're using about an average of about 370 gallons of water per day, maybe a little more, or definitely a little more when we're using the fountain. So Camilla, can you give us a brief overview of just where we sit on the watershed?
Yeah, sure. So this will be important for folks here. One of the things that the building is able to do is to protect a first order stream that is sitting just below the site there. Thank you, Reed. So you can see those that elevation. So there are not very many first order streams left within our older cities. I come from Philadelphia originally, and I worked at another center that had only 2 first order streams in the entire city. So I find it interesting that I'm back in that same space. And the design of the site, that main LA is actually breaking up to what I would call micro watersheds. So on the top side of that watershed, that water is flowing in and being managed. On the other side of that watershed, it is being celebrated, and that is what that means is that you're able to see that rain coming through that rain ravine, through the rain veil that I spoke of, and then it goes into a constructed wetland, and so that wetland is holding the water back and making sure that nature can do what it's supposed to do, which is to clean the water, slow it down so that there is a nice slow release back into the environment. I really like this feature because it is important now as we're dealing with climate change and different climate issues. You know, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and other cities across the United States are experiencing huge storm events, and we really have to pay attention to what is happening to all of that storm water.
Great, thank you. So as part of the water pedal for the Living Building Challenge, we are not connected in any way to the city sewer system. So you can see here on this diagram, this is our on-site wastewater treatment system. It's basically a glorified septic tank. We have a two compartment, 1,500 gallon, two compartment septic tank where the bacterial processes do their thing. Then it transfers into a dual chamber recirculating sand filter that you can see on the bottom right, the diagram. So the water sprays through that a few times, and then it is gravity fed through an ultraviolet light at the number 3 there in the photo. Then it gets stored in a 2,000 gallon dosing tank at number 4, and at which point it's pumped out at regular intervals into a shallow drip field out into the woods. So as far as the on-site wastewater system goes, as the amateur economist in me can't help but wonder if that money might have gotten stretched a little further somewhere else. We're only putting about 350, 370 gallons a day on average through this system. So that's something for, I guess, other people to think about on the next project. Stormwater, this is more my style. This is one of those things, just like our passive energy strategies, where those ancient technologies are really hard to improve upon. You can see on this diagram, we separate the grounds into different infiltration areas. On the left side of the screen, infiltration areas 1 and 2, those are permeable pavers. Then up here on the north end, the north slope of the grounds, you can see our capture and reuse area. I think Camilla mentioned it, but just in case, the north end, this water does not flow directly down into Falls Ravine. This goes down towards Forbes Avenue. It's an ecologically compromised area, so we really try and minimize the stormwater flowing down on the north end of the site. So that's why we're doing all of our water capture on the north side, on the solar panels and the roof of the barn, diverting that water either into the building or over to the south side. We also have an infiltration bed that we'll look at a little more over on that north side. Then on the south side, as Camilla mentioned, we're really celebrating water. We're trying to responsibly get that water back into Falls Ravine, a 9-mile run, so we can see some of that a little more. Camilla mentioned before, as part of the beauty petal, this is our rain veil. We have a gutterless roof. And this is an intentional design where during a rainstorm, you can see this sheet of water coming down in front of these big gallery windows in the public space of the building. Really a beautiful sight to see. From there, it goes down some water steps into the rain ravine, which is that carved sandstone sculpture created by Stacy Levy. You can also see the drain there on the left side of the screen. When our 15,000 gallon cistern is full, all of the overflow that we capture off of the solar panels comes out that drain and ends up going down into the rain ravine. So in the spring and summer, that cistern stays pretty full a lot of the time. And so during a good thunderstorm, this is I'll say it, this is the place to be in Pittsburgh. So that water, the rain ravine, continues down along the side of the building. And ends up in a series of constructed wetlands. They are much more beautiful than this now due to some carefully chosen native vegetation, but they're easier to see during the construction phase. So we have two wetlands up top. There's another one off screen to the right, and both of those wetlands feed down into a third wetland at the bottom, and then they eventually drain down into Falls Ravine, where they were responsibly introduced into Falls Ravine. So all that storm water from the cistern overflow and the roof of the building that's coming down the rain ravine goes into these wetlands, as well as from other points of the southern landscape. There are various collection spots on the landscape that are also fed into these wetlands. So we are controlling the flow just so we don't wash out the stream. And here's another shot there. And I just put in a couple little extras there. Just intentional design with the soil mix and the plant selection. And And yes, okay, here we go. This is below our solar panels. This is before the construction there where we were creating an infiltration basin. This is on the north end of our grounds where I told you we had that compromised watershed that we're really, really trying to protect. So we put an infiltration basin under the parking area. That is impervious asphalt that we have there, as well as a little bit of the driveway has some impervious asphalt as well. So we have various collection points, some various drainage points with inlets that go into this infiltration bed, where, as you know, it just slowly gets released back out into the woods. And then our permeable pavers from the driveway is another technique that we used. We have two areas with permeable pavers. The first area is right in front of the main entrance to the park. We have about a 12-inch infiltration bed below our 8-inch pervious pavers. Our other area has, I think, a 24-inch infiltration bed, and I think that basically just comes down to the differing soil qualities between the two spots. Here is one design oversight here that I'll just point out. You can see as you enter here from Beechwood Boulevard, our driveway slopes up towards Beechwood Boulevard, and then it's a continued uphill slope for about a quarter of a mile. And when it rains, the stormwater comes down and hugs that curb on the left side of the photo and comes down unimpeded. And the first thing it hits is our pervious pavers, bringing with it silt and sediment. And it's kind of a shame. So there's a little bit of, so we do get a little bit, fortunately, it all hugs that curb on the left-hand side. So it's not compromising the entire site, but it does make it difficult to maintain. So there is some ponding that occurs on the left-hand side, even though the pavers themselves are, the majority of the site is operating properly. But I think if we had put in a little catch basin with a clean out here and then an inlet pipe that could capture all that water and pump it directly underneath into the gravel, that would have been a nice touch. Data monitoring, we don't have the most accurate data monitoring for these stormwater systems. I know this is a challenge that many of you face, is how do you quantify these things? We do have a Hobo MX water level logger for the pervious pavers. And that took a little bit of getting used to. The data that we were collecting with it looked like this, which might mean something to many of you. It means nothing to me. We got all of this information out there and just looked at it and didn't know what to do. So fortunately, Barton Kirk from Ethos Collaborative took a look at this and helped us to take these numbers and turn them into something that we can use, which is basically figure out how much water are we collecting and what is the infiltration rate that it drains out of the infiltration bed below the pavers. And then we enlisted the help of some fantastic library and information science students from the University of Pittsburgh, who created an app for us where we could update this data in a CSV file, run it through their app, and it would spit out this fantastic data here where it would isolate each storm event, show us the volume of storage from that event, show us a running total of water capture and infiltration rates from each event. They told me it was easy, but I'll never understand that world. It is amazing. So it also gives us these this nice graph for people like me who just like to visualize things. So green infrastructure, average annual results. As I mentioned, with energy, metering that is pretty easy. We have meters on everything. We can tell you, we can pinpoint 15-minute increments for how much energy the fountain used last July or whatever. The water's more difficult, but we do have some metrics here. The Governor's Drive, those are the permeable pavers with the that we are measuring with that water level logger. In an average year, we're collecting about 58,000 gallons of water with an average infiltration rate of 1.2 inches per hour. The exit drive is our other section of permeable pavers. This one does not have the water level logger, so we're just extrapolating that data based on the size relative to the Governor's Drive. PV collection to the cistern and or wetlands. We are collecting an average of 370,000 gallons a year. That is running off the roof of the barn and the solar panels and running through our cistern. 167,586 gallons of that is being used for the facility. So that's the water that we're using for the toilets, the fountain, the produce garden. The remainder of that 370,000 gallons, so another 200,000 gallons there, is basically catch and release. That's cistern overflow, water that we diverted from that compromised north side of the landscape over to the constructed wetlands on the south side. And then the building roof capture, we're extrapolating this just based on area and rainfall totals, but about 154,000 gallons of water is running down to the rain ravine from the roof of the building. So that is, so what's that? So that's about 350,000 gallons a year that we're running down through that rain ravine into the constructed wetlands, along with other water that's being put through there from other points in the landscape. So I don't know, you all probably know better than me the significance of those numbers, but I don't know, I just think in general, the Environmental Center is, it's just a good showcase to see some of these designs in practice, ask questions, learn about them. And so, yeah, that's basically the end of what I had to say. I know there's going to be a Q&A here in a little while, unless Camilla, you wanted to add anything?
Nope, thank you.
All right, fantastic. Erin Copeland, she's our senior restoration ecologist. If she has joined us, she was in a meeting earlier. I hope she's out there now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Erin. I see Erin. Okay.
Hey, good morning all. Ooh, but I hear some feedback. Now it's gone away. Do I sound okay?
You sound great. Welcome, Erin.
Thanks for having me, Annie, and all here at the Green Infrastructure Network. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep, looks
Yes.
great.
Okay, wonderful. I have to say, sometimes Teams throws me off because I can't see all of you. I feel like I'm just talking to myself, but I'll go with it. So I just wanted to put this in here at the beginning. My name's Erin. Reed already let you know that I'm the senior restoration ecologist at the Parks Conservancy. And I'm going to take you on a virtual tour of the work that we've been doing for more than a decade on a variety of green infrastructure projects. And they're not just built green stormwater infrastructure, they're also what I talk about and others talk about as natural green infrastructure. So we have that in our park system. People love it, the forests, the meadows, the streams, but we also recreate some of those systems as well as the, the built green infrastructure. And so I'm going to go through a little bit of that. Well, excuse me, I'm going too fast with my mouse. But I first just wanted to put up here that, folks in Pittsburgh love their parks, and we love the parks too, of course, and that 95 or 96% of people in Pittsburgh believe that parks are important to the quality of life in our city or in our community. And I bring this up because parks are amazing places where lots of benefits happen, and green infrastructure can bring additional multifunctional space to those park systems. But in the end, people care about them and love them. And so all of the GI that we try to do, as showcased very beautifully by Camilla and Reed, is beautiful. And hopefully it improves the health of the people that live here, but also, makes the parks better. And so just so you all are aware, we have 160 parks or so. If you add rec centers, that's a different number. So sometimes the numbers sound different. About 2,500 acres. So it's not so new anymore, but I still am very excited about 650 acres of wooded space that is Hayes Woods. And it isn't park just yet, but it's owned by the city of Pittsburgh. So we have 5 regional parks, plus Hayes Woods, plus 21 community parks, and a much larger number of neighborhood parks. And I'll take you through examples of each of these kinds of parks, but I'll just say that they're broken down like that based on size. And so the regional parks are the biggest, the community parks are sort of in the middle ground, and then the neighborhood parks are the smallest. And so this is our park system across the city of Pittsburgh. The darkest green are those parks. What you can see here too are some of the sewer sheds in the city of Pittsburgh. And I guess what I want folks to notice here is that oftentimes parks are at the heart of these sewer sheds or these watersheds. There's a great ability to work within the park system to improve whatever kind of issue that there is related to water, whether it be combined sewer overflows, whether it be localized flooding, leave it there. But also that basically within all the parks here that are circled, there has been some amount of stormwater planning, green infrastructure planning, or even implementation of projects. And so the Parks Conservancy, as well as any other folks that work in the parks, which of course includes the city of Pittsburgh because they own the land and do a huge number of projects as well, are thinking about stormwater for the resilience of our city, but for the health of our community as well. And so in my virtual tour, I just put this map in a couple of times so that I could show people where I was talking about. So the first project that I'll go through is here along Washington Boulevard, and this was installed in 2006, so long ago. But basically, this was a soggy lawn along Washington Boulevard, soggy because rainwater collects there. It's a former stream valley, and the city of Pittsburgh heavy construction crew dug out these seasonal pools. So there are a series of 7 of them. And then the Parks Conservancy with volunteers seeded that space. And so those seasonal pools hold water from the hillsides that drain down to that and have become a new ecological system that is much healthier than what had been there before, which was lawn. And, we didn't have red-winged blackbirds there in the past, and we do now. I also have seen turkeys and fox as well. And so then the next park that I'm going to show you is August Wilson Park. It had formerly been known as Cliffside, and it is a neighborhood park, so it's small and hard to see, but it's just there if you can see my cursor. August Wilson Park was one of the first projects that was done after the planning process, which was called the Green Print. And it was a neighborhood plan, a community plan that wanted to really talk about and showcase this village in the woods. The Hill District is amazing in the forested hills that it has around it and the tree canopy that's part of it. And so one of the first projects from that Green Print was to renovate August Wilson Park. And so I show you this schematic to just say that, this park was redone because the neighbors wanted it and because it's part of this planning effort, but incorporated in it are some stormwater features, which one of them is this sort of capture space and what our parks curator called a runnel. And so you'll see here, this is a before shot. This is the park that, it definitely needed improvements and updates. This is a shot of the park after the renovation happened. And this is that sort of stormwater feature that I was trying to show you. You can't see the full length of it, but it goes and collects water off screen all the way uphill. and has a series of sort of landings and drops as you go underneath the path system out to the edge of the park. And so then the next park I'm going to go to and talk a little bit about is here in the southern part of town, McKinley Park. McKinley Park is within the Sawmill Run watershed. There are two projects that are completed or substantially complete. They're both in the Beltshoover neighborhood and are in the more northern section of the park. And so this was a project that was completed. I would have to look back at my notes to tell you the exact date, but it was probably around like 2016 or so. Anyways, this is a parking lot where the community, of course, parks. This is the McKinley Park Shelter House, and these are some historic structures, steps that were constructed. Of course, it's in disrepair, and this is the project after it was completed. And so you can see here this historic wall. If you can imagine those steps, they were rebuilt to look similar to this. There's pervious pavement that was added to the parking lot. And then there were 3 rain gardens that were also added to that parking lot to capture stormwater. And of course, there were additional native plantings that were added to the site as well. And what, the Parks Conservancy always does is add amenities as well to these projects. So, new benches and things like that. And of course, you can see the bee balm here in the background. I'm sorry, cardinal flower. And so then we're still in McKinley Park, but we're at a different section of the park where you can see up here is Michigan Street. And this is an enormous retaining wall that's holding up that hill. I was out in a rainstorm and was able to capture some images before it was constructed. And the neighbors here, as part of the McKinley Park Master Plan, the neighbors told us about how much damage occurred in their park because of overland flow and runoff. And so the project that I'm going to show you next was to mitigate some of those issues, both along the trails, but to park features like a baseball field that actually is not able to be used anymore because of flooding. And so this over here is one of the trails, and the water running alongside it. And so this is the partially complete project here, and I'll just explain it to you. This is Michigan Street again, like I mentioned before. And that here is that retaining wall. And so this is a rendering that shows us there were a couple of rain gardens that were captured here. There's a conveyance channel, and then there's a larger rain garden that's here at the bottom of this retaining wall. And so you can see that here, rain gardens at the top, conveyance channel, another big another small rain garden, and then the largest rain garden here. And so, that project, and I should just pause, and I'm sorry I didn't say this in the beginning, but all of these projects are always done in collaboration with the city of Pittsburgh, who owns this land, but also we have been partnering with many others as well, like Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority, monitoring with the University of Pittsburgh, and myriad number of funders as well. And so then the final place where I will stop is here in Schenley Park to show you a couple of projects there. And Schenley Park is part of the 4 Mile Run, a watershed. And so this project was again completed a little while ago now, probably 2014 and 2015. This is the Bob O'Connor Golf Course. It's in the Phipps Run Phipps Run watershed that flows to Panther Hollow and out to 4 Mile Run and the Mon. Because it's such a large lawn area, it delivered quite a lot of runoff to Phipps Run, which is a small stream. And so these retentive grading areas were built along the golf course in places that made sense for the golf course so that people could still play there, but there could be water that was captured before It made its way down into this valley in here to the woods, which is where Phipps Run is. And there were 18 to 20 or so of them installed. And so here are a couple of others. The one you saw before was up here at the top of the hill and doesn't actually capture as much water. But these ones at the bottom of the hill, because there's more land area draining to it, capture much more water. And then finally, in another section of Schenley Park, close to the Bartlett Playground, there were infiltration trenches, a meadow, and a level spreader that were installed. This is Beacon Street here in Schenley Park. New inlets were constructed to deliver stormwater to these infiltration trenches, perforated pipes buried in rock that infiltrate water below the the land surface. And this is what it looked like soon after construction. And then this is to give you a little bit of an idea of what you could walk through now, although this is a couple of years ago now. This image is from where Beacon Street is up here to the left. And the infiltration trenches are sort of underneath all these native grasses, and you can walk through this meadow. But I'll say too that now walking through this meadow is a little bit different because maintenance is such an important piece of all of this work, and our staff is working very diligently to try and manage invasive and non-native species, specifically Canada thistle in this meadow. But it's not an easy plant to manage. And there have been some changes over the years with like what tools are able to be used. And so our team has moved to mowing, and we'll probably be adding in some shade trees as well to try and shade out that specific plant. But sometimes you'll see swaths of the meadow cut, and it's so that Canada thistle doesn't go to seed while it's, growing. And with that, I just wanted to provide a little bit of context of some other projects that the Parks Conservancy has done in Pittsburgh. And I think it's time for the question and answer.
Thank you so much, Erin, Reed, Camilla. That was fantastic. I also enjoyed taking a tour of some of my favorite places in the city. I walked through that meadow to get from my house in Greenfield to the farmer's market in Squirrel Hill, which is my closest farmer's market. I spent a good bit of time on the trail. I know it's against the rules, but was walking the trail last evening in Panther Hollow along 4 Mile Run because the moon is almost full. And so you can enjoy our parks at all times of the day, whenever you have when do we ever not have clouds? But it was such a wonderful evening to enjoy the park as well. So we are now opening it up to questions. I know that there are lots of meetings going on today. So if I didn't see any pop in the chat bar while the presenting was going on, but if there are some now, you're welcome to unmute and ask, or you can type it in the chat bar. While we're waiting to see if anyone pops in for a question, I just want to thank again the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy. You're a constant inspiration to me about how we can silo bust the idea between green infrastructure, Green Building Alliance, and all these different types of organizations about how you can bring beauty and responsiveness and equity into every aspect of stormwater, whether it's in a park, in a building, in a cistern. There are so many different ways that we can incorporate these metrics. And maybe we're not all going to achieve living building status, but we can certainly achieve as many of the metrics as possible within all of the projects we work on together. So we have our first question. It popped in the chats bar. I'm going to read it unless they would like to unmute, but it says, did you perform a cost benefit analysis considering the future O&M costs to examine the real cost of GI? And I'll throw that to all three presenters if you would like to attack that question about O&M and whether or not, regular pavement versus porous pavement came up whenever you were doing your initial design.
Or I guess I wonder, does that person want to speak specific? Like, do they want to know about the environmental center, or do they want to know about green infrastructure as a whole?
They weren't specific. would the person who posted the question like to pop on? They might not be able to, but I imagine, so just in general, across either your project, Erin, or even at the Environmental Center, is a part of the Living Building Challenge to prove the value through similar costs, or is cost not a part of the equation, I guess, is a good question.
Well, I'll address from the Environmental Center. I think Erin probably has more hands-on knowledge in the planning of other projects. I came on right at the tail end of construction, so I know that to some degree, yes, cost-benefit analyses were performed. I do think that yeah, a lot of the technologies with GI as well as everything else are expensive to be used on a smaller scale like ours. I think a lot of these strategies that are used would probably work better on like a mid-size, like a planned development level, such as the geothermal heating and cooling, that type of thing, some type of a shared project. As far as our GI strategies go from an O&M maintenance, I will rank them in order. I like the infiltration bed below our impervious surfaces. Every 2-3 times a year, I just have to dig out the sediment from the bottom of the inlets, and that's pretty much it. They take care of themselves. The constructed wetlands, so far they have required no maintenance, but I know that every few years we're going to have to do a pretty serious excavation to remove the top layer of sediment just to get those draining properly. So far they've required no maintenance, but in the not too distant future, that task seems pretty daunting. And the permeable pavers, I feel like you could just do an infiltration bed with some catch basins. It's a nice visual. It's something to look at and talk about. It's nice from an educational standpoint, but I think there are cheaper ways to get the same effect.
I would just bolster what Reed said from an educational standpoint and the way that I see the building. And I obviously see the building in a different way. I think it's done to the highest level possible so that it can be a teaching tool, so that you can step onto the building as an engineer, as a designer, as a homeowner, and see just about every element that you could possibly think of to put in your own project. So it does serve in that way. It's really nice as an educator to be able to demonstrate when an adult or a student comes onto the site. Most people really don't believe that grass is an impermeable surface. They don't understand about that thatch layer underneath, but it's really, really impactful for me to take a glass of water, pour it on the pavers, and then pour it right on that berm in the front, and you can see that the water isn't going down. So consider that there is probably more functional ways to use each of the elements that have been woven together to create this project.
Erin, did you want to talk on the broader aspect of that, or?
I can a little bit. I don't think that I'm going to answer the direct question, and it's not because I'm ignoring it. It's just because I don't necessarily have the exact answer, but there are many people on this call who have designed, implemented, and managed, green infrastructure. And so I'll just say a few things. One is that everything needs maintenance, right? So that Beacon Street meadow, it used to be mown, in the growing season, it used to be mown once a week, right? So that's gasoline, that's carbon. Now it is mown a little bit to manage some Canada thistle, like once a season, something like that. And so in that regard, the maintenance has gone down. On the other hand, there was a fix that was required once in one of the trenches, in one of the inlet boxes. And so that had to go in, but PWSA paid for that. And the city cleans out the inlets. They have to do that anyways if it's a regular inlet or it's an inlet with a box on it. But I'm sorry, a box. I'm not using the filter inserts that hold back all the leaves and that sort of thing. And so that maintenance is spread around and it's different. And I don't honestly know the cost differential there. I'm sorry.
Well, I think that that's actually a hole in our region, and it's something that maybe the green infrastructure is working to address, because I think the question is so hard is because we as a region haven't properly created an environmental economy to prove what the metrics you all saw at your Frick Environmental Center mean to the greater picture, and those projects in the park, what they mean to the greater region in our stormwater management. What will it mean for the city of Pittsburgh to be able to account for those projects when they get their consent decree from the EPA? And how will that help them address those long-term overflows in our system? And those types of environmental economies, we learned about environmental economy in my undergrad and my master's. And it's funny that I still don't think we're there yet in truly understanding the things that Camilla was talking about, and Aaron and Reed, about how to account for them. And it's one of the things we actually discussed in our Green Infrastructure Atlas meetings, as we were discussing, well, how do we start to get those triple bottom lines and those triple benefits? And how do we start accounting for the human economy of the placement of GI throughout our region? And we're still just even learning what those parameters are that we would have to measure. You can't manage what you don't know. And we have to know the parameters before we can even start evaluating. So I think you guys did an excellent job answering the question. I think we're all, as a Green Infrastructure Network, we're programmed to be working towards, I think, and it was inspiring. So I didn't see any additional questions come through the chat box. And so if someone wants to unmute and ask a direct question, they're welcome to do so. Not hearing any additional questions, I just want to thank our speakers today. I enjoyed, it was one of the most peaceful team meetings I think I've been on in a while, because your photos, your descriptions, and even the place you're describing is one that is very important to, I think, us all. So it was a beautiful opportunity to virtually tour the important features in Pittsburgh that are our parks and are the Frick Environmental Center. So I just want to thank you, Camilla, Reed, and Aaron. It was a pleasure to have you here today. For the rest of GIN, thank you for coming this morning. As you know, this will be recorded. We'll be posting it so that it can be viewed at a later time and shared throughout our network in an educational opportunity for us all. And there's some big announcements going to be coming out about GIN, but I'm going to be making those by email. So please, if you're on the call still, check your email moving forward. The sneak peek is that the Green Infrastructure Network is going to be offering 3 charrettes in 2021. And we are excited to have the opportunity to create the same GIN committees that built our South 21st Street charrette several years ago. And as we move forward those, I'm looking to learn and grow with the professionals in this network to make those super successful and helpful to create the conceptual designs that will create those environmental economies that we're then working to study and understand. So thank you all for attending, and I hope you all have a spectacular spring day. Thanks again.
Thanks, Annie.
Thanks, Annie. Happy day.
Have a great day.
You as well. Thank you.